I'll introduce our first speaker, Karl Fender now. Architect Karl Fender is reported to have began his career as an apprentice to Robin Boyd, a Melbourne modernist architect of profound historical significance, whose influence as a design-focused mentor has shaped Karl's architectural ethos throughout his professional life. Karl spent the majority of his formative years based in London and Rome, before embarking on a sabbatical to complete a Master of Architecture at Harvard University. More international experience then ensued in Hong Kong and Bangkok. As a founding partner of Fender Katsalidis, Karl has had a profound impact on the architectural landscape in Australia and across the globe, including the design of Melbourne's two tallest buildings, Australia 108 and Eureka Tower. The practice has also been engaged to design Merdeka 118, which will become the world's second tallest building once completed. Karl's diverse background and extensive international experience have informed his commitment to urbanization and architecture's contribution to the public realm. He continues to play an active role within the practice and wider design community, including as chairman of the Council of Tall Building and Urban Habitats Awards jury, and having served as both national and state president of the Australian Institute of Architects and a Venice Biennale committee member. Karl is an avowed urbanist who loves life in the city and seeks every opportunity to improve livability through the influence of the buildings and precincts he helps create. And today, Karl is going to talk about the design of Merdeka 118, all the way from Melbourne via Zoom. Welcome, Karl. The floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. That was way too generous. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great.
Okay now.
Look, thanks to all at PAM who have organised today's talks. I'm very interested to hear the remainder of this session after me too. It's a pleasure to be with you all, although virtually I'd much rather be with you in person, I have to say, because I've missed KL. It's become like a second home to me after almost 10 years of constant travel there from Melbourne because of the Merdeka 118 program. Look, before we start, I'd just like to remind everyone that it takes a large team to produce any building project. In this case, quite a huge team, just such a major project and so important. So I really would like to start by acknowledging RSP, Hood and Farid for their assistance on the tower, plus the residential, and GDP for their work on the retail and also the residential. Both the firms, both local, have carried out documentation, compliance, and site services during construction. And it's been a really generous partnership, providing fantastic support, and I'm deeply grateful. Also to Turner International, who have guided the project since inception, and obviously the builder, Samsung. So you may be asking, why am I here representing Fender Katsalidis? I'd start that by saying we were catapulted into the world of mega tall buildings in 2010 when we were approached by PNB Merdeka Ventures, which was a specially formed subsidiary of PNB tasked with the primary objective of realising Merdeka 118 under the helmsmanship of CEO Tengku Dato Abdulaziz, who's become a great friend during this incredible process we've been through. But why us? The board was looking, I think, for an experienced high-rise super tall architect in the region. And, you know, Australia was pretty much firmly in that category. I think Australia and Malaysia enjoy a strong relationship. We have a free trade agreement. 10% of all Malaysians living abroad do so in Australia. And Melbourne is a really popular place for Malaysians to have property, to live, and to have their kids go to school. I think the two countries like each other, and that's the basis of a great partnership. I guess they knew of Eureka Tower, which was our first super tall. It was just got there at 300 meters, and it seemed to give us the right credentials. And so we really found ourselves with an incredible task ahead of us. And I should just put us into a bit of perspective here. The board knew of Merdeka Tower, 300 metres. It was the tallest building in Australia. You can see it, that is Melbourne, there's Merdeka Tower, and then alongside it is Australia 118, which is the building just behind me here, which was finished a few months ago. And that one's 320 square metres. And with Merdeka Tower, we were continuing the exploration of the tower in the city and its presence and its impact. And it all started with our first tower, Republic Tower. This is in Melbourne. It was only 100 metres and it was in the late 90s, but it started to look at how the tower could work as an object in the city, but also at the ground plane with something to offer. And in this case, it's a continuing art program, which is mounted onto a chimney from the subway below. We then, there were a few other buildings, but Merdeka then was an amazing step for Melbourne, 300-metre residential tower. But it concentrated also on the ground plane, making arcades for connectivity, introducing art and mixed use, bars and things, restaurants on the ground floor. And it had a sky deck. And that sky deck, we thought, really for the first time democratised the view experience. And that then led to Australia 108, which is the building behind me, which is 318 metres. And that starburst, the gold star you see embedded in the building, is actually where all of the facilities, 2 swimming pools, 2 gyms, dining, living areas, and that's available to everyone in the building. And for us, that democratised the living experience. So people living down below could come up and see a beautiful view and enjoy living up with those sort of views. 308 Exhibition Street under construction, put a residential tower with a hotel and linked them with a sky bar for the public. And it took the parkland down below and ran it into the podium so that the base of the building became very much at one with that part of the city. And this particular one, Queen's Place, also under construction, these 2 towers have got an incredible base full of home offices, studios, etc., and arcades. Melbourne's really well known for its arcades. So although these buildings become emblematic in the city and really give strength to the character and reputation of the city, it's the ground plane that really is important. And I think that these buildings, plus others that we've done, really prosecuted the touch points of high rise and high density in the city. The building as a marker, the building providing mixed use, the building providing population to incentivize the public realm, and beautiful things for the public at the public realm. These were all really extremely relevant pursuits or investigations with respect to Merdeka 118, as you'll see as we go through. Just very quickly, yes, we were designing the building from Melbourne, but Melbourne and KL, or Malaysia, are really quite close. We are just a 7-hour flight away from each other. We have a 3-hour time difference, 2 hours when there's no daylight saving. And so this was a very fluid and easy relationship to work with our client and with our local partners, GDP and RSP. So this was really lovely for us. We found coming to KL, what an amazing city. Love that city. It's just, it has so much intensity and vibrance. And the buildings that came before it, the tall buildings, the Petronas Towers, the KL Tower, and now we have TRX. They've become icons in the city. As a visitor, I get a bit confused in KL still, I have to admit, because it's organic and it's a lot of traffic and a lot of trees, and using these major towers as kind of shapes in the distance orients me to where I am. And I really do enjoy that. And they're starting to frame the city. They're starting to stretch the city. They're starting to create more energy at the base of where they occur, both TRX and Merdeka. And so this particular building of Merdeka is very, very important in the growth of Malaysia. But what a challenge. What a challenge to be putting this tower right next to Stadium Merdeka, where Tunku Abdul Rahman declared independence in 57. You know, and he must have been a great man. As the first Prime Minister, he states that he wanted to see a modern future for Malaysia based on the highly cultural history. And so for us to be putting a tower on this particular site and respecting the nature and history of Stadium Merdeka was really, really exciting. The site, luckily, was able to extend beyond and across the front of Stadium Merdeka. So this gave us quite some opportunity to start putting Merdeka back into a kind of nice, a nice format. The spirit of the place. Wow. Again, look at Stadium Negara and Stadium Merdeka back in the 50s, well, it must be in the 60s with Negara there. But it's got a park in front of Negara shared by Stadium Merdeka. And this was about community space, community gathering. But, you know, if you look at it today or when we first came there, the park was basically nothing. It was just sort of asphalt. And the front of Stadium Merdeka was also just asphalt, had a lot of motorbikes parked on it. And it seemed to have, it wasn't in our mind, it had lost the importance of its heritage beginnings and what it should be offering to the public. So this was a great opportunity to give back. And that was part of what Merdeka was all about. This wonderful photograph was very inspirational to us, particularly the raised hand, which now has been attributed to the design of the spire on the building, which is something I particularly love, because it's great when the community and the public start to invest their imagination in your building. So the energy of the place, we're next to Chinatown. That's a beautiful place. My wife loves going there when on the many times we come to KL. Bustling, it's a bit interesting and a bit run down in parts, but very much a tourist attraction. And of course, the traffic and the monorail, all of these things give energy to our site and are things that we, you know, that our presence will help their presence, help the traffic if we handle it right, and, you know, help the whole precinct around Chinatown and around Stadium Merdeka. When we first started, this scheme was shown to us. You can see, you know, there were thoughts about the importance of this site, and it really, this was a campus style of project, and it invested itself heavily on Islamic and Malaysian symbolism. But because it was a campus, the buildings, and there were many of them, were all spread out. And the interstitial spaces between were really just connections. Yeah, public connections, but no real place for public gathering or making parks. So the idea of us coming to this site really was to understand the opportunity of maybe compressing the footprint and allowing a public park, allowing circulation around the building to happen, and you know, all to the benefit of the community. And so we had to start with a diagram, and this was our diagram. The red dot is the site for the tower. It's on axis with Stadium Negara and has a triangular relationship between Stadium Negara and Stadium Merdeka. But that allowed us to put this axis right through the site. And that axis excited us because on the one hand, it could provide a park on that axis to Stadium Merdeka, but it could also run right through the building and make the building available to the public, so that from Jalan Hang Jebat up at the top or the north, you could actually come off that street, you could come to the building, you could go through the building, and then you could go down into the park and through to Stadium Merdeka. And that access will also provide in the future a beautiful museum by RSP and a mosque by GDP. So that garden that is on that axis will really, really become a focus and a destination for the people of KL and Malaysia and tourists. And so there's the building in place now underneath the red dot. You can see that next to it is a circle. That's a glazed roof, which is obviously a reference to Stadium Negara, and a big podium containing retail, theatres, ballrooms, lots of, again, facilities for the community. I ended up with the word community. The power of projects like this is enormous. And so again, this particular project has brought an MTR. It couples onto the Maharaja Lela monorail. It provides the park. The park, I think, is about 160 metres long by 60 metres wide. It's a beautiful water park with water that comes from fountains, mists, cascades, waterfalls, ponds. And if there's an event on in Stadium Merdeka, the water can be turned off, and we have a beautiful pre-function park for the stadium for people to gather. And you can see here that the park is actually the carpet to the front door of the tower, Merdeka 118. We studied a number of different tower forms, obviously, as one does, just in the search for a tower shape that not only was appropriate symbolically in its place, but also disturbed the wind in the right way and became what we felt would be a very, very interesting building in the round, always changing visually as you see it from different parts of the city. And in fact, these are the little gold maquettes that I showed the then Prime Minister to try and, let's say, get his opinion on what was the correct approach. And fortunately, his opinion coincided with ours, and it was the building on the very right. And those little models didn't worry about what the facades looked like. They were just placemakers, a way of getting to a point of being able to have a base building shape, form, height, which then obviously needed to be clad. And again, the Petronas towers and the beautiful plan forms which come from Islamic patterns, that inspired us, but obviously that's not what we were going to do. We were very interested in the Songket patterns of Malaysia, in the materials and the way that the metallic threads highlight those materials, and the way those materials change in different light and in different shapes. And that led us to this, this building form, which is a series of folded triangular plates. And we liken those plates to well, when I was presenting to the Prime Minister, I said, each of these triangles that form the fold lines of the building represent the different cultures and backgrounds and of all the people that make the rich mix of Malaysian, the Malaysian community. And then the fold lines are expressed so that they could be light pathways. So it's a bit like the threads in the Songket materials. And the triangulation of the tower was then taken down into the podium. And you know that many times the retail podiums of these towers become boxes, just big boxes for internal experiences. So we were very much of the opinion that the podium should form the foot or the pedestal of the tower, and in fact have the same kind of geometrical approach as the tower had. You can also see around it the 3 residential towers, which is something of the future. These elevations show you just how the triangulations on the building facades work. And again, this shaping of the building also really helps to disturb the wind, and that decreases the wind pressures on this, which is in fact a 600 over meter vertical cantilever from the ground. So you can imagine the pressures at the top of these buildings, and the more you can decrease the wind pressure on them, then the more efficient the structure can be. This diagram shows you in section that the building comprises obviously a centre core, but also 3 belt truss zones. And it's in those belt truss zones that the transit floors for the elevators occur. There are 89 elevators. There are, and just some other interesting facts, 18,000 facade panels. Each facade panel is 2 windows. And 8 kilometres of LED facade lighting. That's going to be quite wonderful because it can be programmed. It can be programmed for different light travels, different patterns, and it will go up the spire as a sparkle type of light effect. Just if you ever ask yourself, how much does a building weigh? This building weighs in the order of 13 Titanics, which is about 685,000 tonnes. These are huge structures, and to watch them being built is a marvel. If we just start looking at how the building structures, and we start at the base of the building, we have in this zone, and at the commencement, we have the cofferdam. It's about I think it was about 1.5, maybe a bit more metre thick cofferdam, which went 20 metres deep and encapsulated the piles. There are 137 piles. They went down 60 metres, and each pile was 2.2 metres diameter. Then on top of the piles is supported the raft slab. So that slab is about 88 metres diameter, and it was 4 metres thick, poured in 3 pours, 1 contiguous pour under the building and 2 flanking arc pours. The core itself, well, the walls at the base were almost 2 metres thick in a triangular shape, and that created a floor plate, particularly for the commercial, of about 12 to 13 metres deep, which is a very, very efficient, a beautiful floor plate depth curtain wall to core for commercial use. Wow. The mega columns running up the building, 4 metres by 3 metres at the base. And then you see the belt truss zones with the outriggers connecting to the core. This fantastic diagram just showing you how all of that works. And this, in fact, creates alternate structural pathways. So if there's catastrophic structural failure, the loads can find other pathways and not just collapse. Just a photograph at the top of one of the outriggers. The steel in those outriggers is 100 millimetres thick, just enormous. And here we have just an artist's diagram inside one of the belt truss zones. They become the transit zones, and that's where you can really understand the strength and structure of the building. So these are fabulous public areas throughout the building. This just shows you on the left-hand side the green floor plates, the top one for the hotel, the bottom one for the commercial. And the commercial floor plates here, that's the minimum floor plate. And as the facade of the building expands and contracts, we go from a net floor space of 1,900 meters, square meters, to 2,300 square meters net lettable area. And the hotel floor plate, about 20 hotel rooms per floor. The offices are fed with services, air particularly, from below the floor, and the return air is taken out through the ceiling. So personal comfort is guaranteed at any place in the floor plate by personal adjustment at a workstation. A typical hotel room designed by GA Design out of London, fabulous views of KL, and the hotel reception on level 75. So once you're in the building, you run the elevators up to level 75. That's where you check in. And then from there, you go to your room in an upward direction. Many of you will have been into some of the modern hotels where you go up to the higher level hotel reception to then go down to your hotel room. And for me, I always get lost. I never know what I'm doing, but this one is very straightforward. On the top of the building, again, for the public, an observation deck. This observation deck is really going to be a fantastic destination for tourists, for Malaysians, for people in KL. It's being designed at the moment, and it's very, very exciting. Level 115 is where you arrive from these elevators, glass bullet elevators, 2-story, which take you to either the sky deck or a restaurant below. And from those elevators, you go up an escalator to level 116, which is the observation deck. And this will be very carefully curated. This, I think, will be it will be the best observation deck in the world. The curation is very exciting and will tell some marvelous stories. And you'll also be able to step outside and sense the fresh air that the birds sense at that height. From there, you go to 116 mezzanine, and that's a floor of thrills. So stay tuned to that. That will be interesting indeed. And this section just shows how the sky deck works at the top of the building. We're going to go down to the bottom of the building, and this is a section through the reception halls. The hall on the right is the one that faces onto Jalan Hang Jebat, and that has the entry for the hotel and the entry for the office and the retail, one of the retail entries. And you then climb 10 meters up escalators or stairs through a glazed corridor to get to the top atrium reception hall. And that hall faces the gardens, Stadium Merdeka, and Jalan Maharaja Leila. On arrival, you come under a huge canopy. This is the floor, the floor plan of those. You can see the hotel lobby, the commercial lobby, separated by a fountain, but the volume of that atrium, which is about 30 meters tall in its highest place, stays quite remarkably. When you arrive at the entry to the building, you arrive under this grand entry hall, which unusually, I think, gives you a view of the building above. You know, so often you arrive at a building under a canopy and you've then lost contact with the building above. But it's the entry into the building, the thought that we had for how do these large-scaled atriums, and they had to be large to be an appropriate scale with a building of this height and stature, but how do they feel for the public? What's the experience in there? And I have to say we were quite taken by the Gomantong caves, these in Borneo, these photos showing the infiltration and the filtration of light from above, and even the sense of water on the walls, and these things, these characteristics interested us. And so as you come into the hall, and this is on the commercial side, the hotel side is on the other side of the central water feature. But you can see the skylights will let various patterns of changing light come through the building at different times of the day. And the wall in the middle is a glass wall to the elevators that are the observation elevators, and they will then have water just streaming down the outside so that it moderates the experience of the elevators taking off and arriving. As we go into the building, we're now looking at the core of the building come down as a glass crystal into the travertine stone walls of the atria. And as we go through, we hit the escalators. We have a VIP entrance on the right, and we ascend the escalators or the stairs with the modelled glass wall on the right-hand side looking into the cores of the building, and the wall on the left separating the retail. And we can get into the retail from this walkway. We start to head to the top atrium. And as we look up, we can see through the glass roof, the building above, and coming around the corner into the Maharaja Leila atrium, we start to see the Merdeka bar, which is, we call the Merdeka bar because of the shape, obviously, of the backlit onyx feature ceiling to it. This is the place of inquiry to the whole entry sequence. And looking back, this is the Merdeka bar, looking a bit radioactive. And behind, where the green arrows are, is again a 35-story atrium, which actually acts as a chimney. So that as the warm air rises, it rises through that atrium, being the highest place, and it's then extracted via the plant room. And if you're game enough, you can stand on the glass floor and look down and see the comings and goings of the atrium, 35 odd stories below. And here is the building as it appears from the south. This is the Stadium Merdeka side of the building. This is a diagram of the podium with the retail on the right and the west podium with the ballroom and the theatre. But the important thing about this diagram are all the red arrows. This means that people coming to the site have many opportunities of getting into the building, of discovering, of finding the retail, of walking through the actual tower. It's a building that gives a pedestrian network back to the area, and an interesting network. And that network happens from the perimeter of the podium. You can see the podium here is the crystalline form, also cracks open here and there on the roof to provide very richly planted roof gardens and swimming pools for the residents who will be here in the future. The building, the podium touches the ground in certain places, but people can walk all the way around this podium without getting wet and in shade. And that's another unusual thing about this retail offer, and that is that you do not have to go inside to get into a protected environment. You can circulate the perimeter of the building. Part of the building comes down to basically to mask some of the subway infrastructure, chimney, and this section goes into the retail and shows a section through the glass dome. It's an 88-metre self-supporting tessellated glass dome, which brings light all the way through the building and allows you from within the building to look up, to see the buildings above, and to know that there's something up above. A lot of the problem with multi-level retail is people don't actually go to the top levels, but we think that the top level of this will be so interesting that it will become a destination, and it will take people through the 6 levels of retail below it. And an early study, we've been looking at how the top level of this can be used, but just an early study to say this should be a place of destination, a place people want to be, and it should be an attractor for people right through all of the retail. And then we have Nagara Place, which is an outdoor but again shaded place. It's for food stalls, and it connects between the retail mall of Stadium Merdeka and Stadium Nagara, which is being refurbished into other uses for performance. So this will be a really important place. Again, the love that Malaysians have of outdoor eating, and certainly the enjoyment that I get when I'm taken to some wonderful outdoor places. And we hope that this will become one of those. So this is a place that was very, very much fun to design. And a little reminder, Hood would know all about this. As architects, when we get an idea, it doesn't matter where we are. This was done, of all places, in a restaurant, thinking about Food Street. And there's our Food Street. A view of the retail entry on the south side above Stadium Nagara, a Stadium Merdeka. And you may have noticed a little circle that was to this bridge. And this little bridge takes people from the end of their sky deck experience across into the retail and to the top levels, or I think it's level 5 of the retail. And so people, having been stimulated in the sky deck, will then have the loveliness of retail stimulation as they come down. And this is the bridge that takes you from Stadium Merdeka across to the retail and over the gardens below. And here you can see the retail dome, and on the right, the gardens and that little bridge link. Just a section through the building there, a wellness center built into the roof space, which again has views of Petronas Towers and the gardens below. So the building really has got many things to give to many people, whether they be workers, visitors, etc. So we're talking about contribution. And one of the things buildings of this intensity and power should do is give back. And buildings like this can become producers rather than consumers. They can produce energy, they can produce lifestyle, they can produce opportunities. And I think that's one of the major challenges for any taller building, particularly when it comes down to the ground plane and what it has to offer the people that are not involved with the building itself necessarily. But sustainability was incredibly important. And this, we worked with Terrapin Green out of New York, and it's got, I won't go through all of this, but it has everything you would expect and more in order to create a green star rating. And also this building, this project gives back so much to the area in terms of road improvement, tunnels which take traffic off the surface, pedestrian bridges. It's these, and that is what happened with, of course, Petronas. So that even though you're introducing thousands of people, you're actually helping the traffic flow and the traffic situation. A little bit about construction. This was the start of the cofferdam. This is exactly where the building was going to be placed and is now placed. The cofferdam with the heads of the piles, 137 piles, 2.2 meters diameter. And this was the reinforcement for the raft slab. The Rio bars, 42 millimeter diameter, 8 layers. The sort of steel and structure involved to support a building like this is absolutely incredible. And the scale of the podium, and you get the scale of the podium and even the core once you start to look at the earth-moving equipment below. The cladding starting to be applied. And some of the structure, this is one of the nodes at the top of the South Atrium. I mean, the steelwork is just phenomenal. They are art pieces. You could put them in the gardens as beautiful art pieces. You can see this one, you can see where it goes at the top of the atrium there on the south facade. And the atrium itself, huge, the steel, enormous. You can see that by the scale of the people that are working on there. And this is one of my favorite photos. It's of Gerard Van Beek, who comes from FK and has been resident on the site throughout construction, working with RSP and GDP. And Gerard has just been there painstakingly ensuring, design conformity and looking at all the little details that really make a huge building like this be successful. A fairly recent shot looking at the north elevation where the elevators run. So the shaft in the middle contains the glass elevators which run the building, 2-story elevators. And I'm coming to the end, and I was almost coming to the end on this day. My shirt is soaked, I am wet, I'm disheveled, I'm tired, I'm slightly distressed, and I'd only spent 2 hours on the site. It was an incredibly hot day, and walking around in the boots and the high vis, I just had to think about all the people that work on that site. there's between 2,000 and 3,000 workers on that site every day. And the logistics in keeping them appropriately moved through the building, keeping them fed, keeping them safe. And there've been, I think, 40 million man hours, I think it is, to date. And there hasn't been one catastrophic or major injury problem. So this is a tribute to all the people involved in running this site. And we should never lose sight of the workmen, the artisans that put all of this together. And so with that, I'm finishing. I hope I haven't gone too long. I would just like to finish with a little apology. The little apology is that we, as a team, didn't take you to giving you the highest building in the world, but second highest, not so bad. Any rate, I actually don't think too much about the height of the building. I think that the height of the building is temporary. It doesn't matter how high you build, someone will build higher. And what does it really mean, any rate? What I think is far more important in a building like this is the way it marks its place, the way it pays respect to the culture, the history, the way it makes a statement about, in this case, Malaysia's view about going forward in a modern world, the way it looks at technology, the way it deals with heritage, the way it gives back to the community at the ground level. I think these are the really important things. And also the environment that it gives to all the workers, that not the workers that made the building only, but the people that will work inside this building and work in comfort with view and hopefully with upliftment. And so with that, I'll finish with a list of some of the major contributors on the project. I thank you very much, and again, regret that I couldn't be there with you to share these talks. I'm looking forward to Hood's talk and taking some questions with Hood at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Karl, for your most enlightening and inspiring talk.